I did not film after Kyson had his tongue and lip tie clipped. It was a little bit of a rough day, and I'm going to get into why I didn't film once the procedure was done. First, I want to update you guys on how he's doing right now. So it has been a week since he had the procedure done. I am doing the exercises every day to make sure that it doesn't grow back, and everything seems to be doing fine there. I noticed that he doesn't stick his tongue out. He used to at least try to stick his tongue out, but he hasn't been doing that since. He really won't let me look at it too much. From what I can see, it looks like it's healing. We do get to cut down on only having to do those exercises 4 times a day now instead of 6 times a day. He is still only nursing with the shield. Before, I could at least try to convince him to latch without it, and sometimes he would, sometimes he wouldn't. But now I cannot convince him to latch without the shield at all. He did just eat, so he's getting really sleepy. You tired, Bella? Plus, we're in his room. I know this looks like a different scenery, and he loves, we're in his rocking chair, and once we get in this thing, he usually falls asleep, so he's probably gonna doze off halfway through this, but we're already. Anyways, I was kind of hoping to not have to use the shield. I thought that was going to be one of the advantages. But I know that he is still healing, so that might change. Okay, I'm tired. Had to go find a pacifier because he's starting to get sleepy. Sorry if I'm rocking this entire video. He's just gonna get fussy if he doesn't get to sleep. So, now to get into what actually happened the day of the procedure. First, I had the option to either be in the operating room or to not be. I chose to be in the operating room simply because I wanted to make sure that he wasn't alone. If you remember from my last video, or not my last video, but the last time he went to the ENT, they were running super behind. I did not have high hopes that they were going to be on time this time, which is probably a good thing because we did not go back until 45 minutes after our appointment time. So we get back there, we go into the operating room, and I will show some footage of that here. So as you can see, it's pretty much just, it's a small room. They had the table in there, and then there are different instruments that they were using, and then behind me and off to the side, it was a chair, and then I had an area to set down the car seat and the diaper bag. It all started going downhill before it even started, actually. So I don't know if the doctor didn't think that I heard him, or I don't know. I'm hoping that he thought that I couldn't hear him. So he turns the corner, and the door was open to the operating room. So he turns the corner with the nurse, and he turns his head to her and says, did you grab the earplugs? And then he laughs. And I get it. Kyson's gonna scream, any baby's gonna scream, any child's gonna scream, because it's hard to explain to them what is going on and why it hurts. So yeah, he's gonna scream and it's gonna be loud. But I don't think that it's something to make a joke about, especially as you're getting ready to walk in the room. So I just didn't say anything about it, went on. Comes in the room, he comments that Kyson's small, that he doesn't look like he's a 4-month-old. And I explained to him for the second time that he is a preemie, so you're right, he's not the same size as other 4-month-olds. Then he asked me again if I'm going to stay in the room. I tell him that yes, I'm going to. And then he asked, he said, "You're not gonna cry, are you?" And he had made the comment at our initial appointment. He asked if this was my first child, and I told him yes, and he said, well, you know, by like the 5th kid, the moms don't cry anymore. And I don't like when doctors say that. I get that maybe there's parents out there that it gets easier with each kid, but to me, that makes it sound like I'm going to care less, or that their pain isn't going to affect me as much when it's my 5th child versus my first child. So that kind of stung. Whatever, we moved on from it. So the first step to the procedure is they have to give him the lidocaine shots, and since he was having tongue and lip tie, they had to give him shots in his lip and underneath his tongue. So they strapped him down on this board, which he was way too small for. So it had like different, there was like body straps, and then there was a head strap. So if he sat where the head strap was, he wasn't reaching all of the body straps. So they kind of put him in between there, so they couldn't put the head strap on him. So they were only able to get 2 of the body straps on there, which it kind of swaddles him in there. And Kyson is a baby that does not like to be swaddled. He didn't mind it in the NICU, but it was like the minute that we got home, he wanted nothing to do with it. And so that's obviously still the case. So he gets swaddled into this thing, and the nurse is holding his head like this. So the doctor gives him the shots, and then they unstrap him from this thing and let me hold him in the meantime, like while the medicine is kicking in. So I'm holding him, comforting him. I get him calmed down, and the nurse tells me that they have to put the electro pads on his back. So I'm like, okay. She said it helps the machine run. I'm like, all right. So she said typically they like strip him down to the diaper, but since he was wearing like a onesie, I just had to take the pants off and unbutton the onesie, and they pull it up because it was cold in there, and I couldn't imagine him being like just down to a diaper. So she goes to put this pad on, and it's literally the width and the length of his entire back. Like, she has to pull the diaper back in order to fit the rest of the pad down there. So she gets it stuck on there, and we wait a little bit longer for the medicine to kick in. The doctor comes back in the room. He says, all right, it should be good. Let's set him back down. So I set him back on the table, and I get him all strapped in again. And the nurses happen to hold his head. The doctor gets his like headlamp on, grabs the little machine. So this is the part where I should mention that they use like a laser pin essentially. It's connected to this one machine, and it like burns through it, and it also stops the bleeding. So he grabs this, it's just like, it literally looks like a pin. So he grabs the pin and he goes to cut his lip tie first, and the machine won't turn on. So he starts like messing with the machine, turning it on, turning it off, unplugging things, trying to figure things out. All the while, Kyson's still strapped to the table, still mad that he has to be swaddled. So he's already screaming and crying and getting himself worked up before anything's actually done. So he finally gets the machine working after what seems like forever, and he goes to like cut his lip tie, and the nurse, is holding his head again, and gets that all done. Kyson's obviously unhappy about it. I'm trying to like kind of touch his feet and touch his hands and comfort him, but there's only so much you can do when something like that's happening. So he gets that done, and then goes to do the same to his tongue tie, and the machine shuts off again. So he's doing the same thing. He's unplugging it, turning it on, turning it off, trying to figure this all out. Can't get it to work. He makes the comment that he's going to have to do it the old-fashioned way, and tries to find the instruments that he needs. Well, the nurse is still holding Kyson's head because he's obviously bleeding a little bit from his lip tie, and he's screaming, so he's producing spit, so she doesn't want him to choke on that. So she's like holding his head in a certain position so that he's not choking, and she's trying to explain to the doctor where these different instruments are, and he, for the life of him, could not figure it out. So he's like searching through all these things. He finally understands where she's trying to explain where the things are at, and goes to go get them, realizes his headlamp is still on. So that yanks him back, so he has to go back, take that off, go grab the instruments, come back over, put the headlamp back on, and then proceeds to cut his tongue tie with scissors, which I know that that's usually like what people use, but these were not like small scissors by any means. These were scissors that were probably not at all intended to cut this. He cuts the tongue tie, and then in order to stop the bleeding, he couldn't use the other machine like he planned on using, so he grabbed something that literally looked like a match with like a black end on it and rubbed it against where the cuts were. This is where I should mention that before the procedure happened, the doctor had talked about what I had to do as far as the exercises. So he was explaining that I got to, rub my finger along his upper lip to keep it from like growing back together. So he's telling me how many times a day I need to do it, different things like that, explaining that that is what has to be done in order for it not to grow back. It's like, okay. After the procedure is done, he's looking around Kyson's mouth and he goes, I'm going to add a stitch in his upper lip. I was really confused. I said, well, why are you doing that? And he's like, well, I want to do that in order to keep it from growing back together. Which is confusing on my end, because to me, a stitch is made to hold something back together. So, from what I can see in his mouth that he will let me see, I believe that the doctor cut too far. Kyson was wiggling a lot. The nurse was trying her best to keep him steady, and it just wasn't happening. So I think that he cut too far in his upper lip, and so that's what the stitch is for, not to keep it from growing back together. But that is just my assumption. He gets done with the stitch, and they unswaddle him and let me hold him to get him calmed back down, and that was my main focus, was to just keep him from crying too much longer. So he settles down pretty quickly. Like, I'm sure that it hurt him. I know that it hurt him, but the whole other aspect of it was being like stuck and swaddled into that thing. So him being held and comforted by me, that did help a lot. After that was done, they had to peel that electrode pad off of him that was super sticky, and I felt horrible for him because that made him more mad once she took that off. So after that was done, I got him dressed and put him in the car seat, and the doctor said that we need to schedule a 1-month follow-up appointment to make sure that everything healed properly. So I'm like, okay. So we go and we schedule that appointment, and then we leave. Kyson did good in the car ride. I got about like 15 minutes down the road though, and he decided that he wanted to eat, which I knew that was going to happen. So I ended up going to Target and nursing there in their dressing room, or in their fitting rooms. While I was nursing him, I was getting my first like good look at him, because when I was in the doctor's office, my focus was get him calmed down, get him in the car seat, get out of here. I really didn't look at him too much. I just got him calmed down, did that, and left. So this is the first time that I was able to really look at his face and look at his mouth and everything like that. And that is when I realized that he had a huge bruise across his cheek, right where the nurse was holding her hands. I thought initially that it was some sort of residue from something that they used, that it was on her glove, and she left the imprint on his cheek. So I didn't think too much about it. I said, I'll wipe it off when we get home. I don't want to bother him right now. And then he got done nursing, and I was packing things up and looking at him, and I noticed that he had a spot below his lip and then on his lip. I thought it was dried blood. So again, I was like, all right, when we get home, I'll wipe it off. Don't want to bother him now. He's finally asleep. So we get home, and on the drive back to our house, it's like a 20-minute drive from there, and I was looking at him in like our baby mirror, and realized that the bruise was getting darker. When I got home, I tried to obviously wipe it off, and that's when I realized that it actually was a bruise. And then when I went to go wipe the spots on his lip, they didn't come off, and I realized that they were burns. The burn on his bottom lip was the exact shape of the pin that they used to cut his tongue tie. And then the spot on his lip was a line. So if you're brave enough to look, I will insert pictures of what his face looked like once I got home. Now, a week later, the bruise is no longer there. Thankfully, that was only there for a few days. The spot on his lip and underneath his lip, those are no longer there. Skin ended up dying because it was obviously burnt. So it wiped off one day when I was giving him a bath. But there is a scar on like his bottom lip in that shape. I'm hoping that obviously that scar will fade, but if not, he's gonna at least have that scar. So that was how awful and absolutely traumatic his tongue and lip tie went. Cannot not recommend him enough to all of our friends in the area, especially the ones that are getting ready to have babies or just had their babies and don't know whether they're going to have to see an ENT, whether that be for tongue or lip ties or any other issues. I just know that if someone mentions his name, I will say don't go there. I don't feel like something like that should have happened. He made the comment that the machine is great when it wants to work. And I don't know why they would use a machine that may or may not work, especially when it's an infant sitting on the table. I obviously came home pretty upset, pretty mad, felt horrible. You guys already knew that going into it, I was not comfortable with it. It was really heavy on my heart, and I was worried about how he was going to handle it. And then, of course, you know, it has to go as badly as possible. But as far as a week later, he is doing okay. He seems like he's going to be fine. I did not make this video to scare you or worry you if your child's getting ready to get a tongue or lip tie clipped. I just put this out there for our experience to know that this is how it should not go. You should not expect to walk in and have all these problems when you walk out. You should be able to be in the procedure room without it being a traumatic experience for yourself and your baby. Don't be scared. Most people have a much better experience than I do. If you did have an experience like Kyson did, or if you have some better stories to share, please comment those down below to either let us know that we're not alone, or you know, to let other people watching this video know that it's not actually a scary thing to experience. I hope this video left you informed, and that if your baby does have to have a tongue or lip tie revision, that it goes much smoother than ours did. So we will see you guys in the next video. We'll do this even though he's asleep. Until next time.